Welcome to this OCR Cambridge Technicals Level 3 in Information Technology video. This is Unit 6 Application Design, and we're looking at Criteria Pass 3, which says illustrate the requirements, functioning and design of an application solution using diagrams. Basically, you're going to sketch out what this application or app looks like. We'll have a look at an example one. We'll also have a look at what the syllabus asks you to create. On page 8 then of the syllabus guide or unit guide gives you an overview, not much more detail about what you're required to do. It does say the evidence will be annotated diagrams. So annotated means that you've written or kind of given a commentary as to what the features of the diagram are. It's not just a drawing or a wireframe diagram. There's actually some kind of written context to it. If you've done Unit 21, the web development unit, you'll be aware of what a wireframe diagram looks like. Let's scroll up and have a look at the content. So we're looking at 3.1, and you'll notice in this section here it gives you a number of different types of diagrams. Now the first thing to say is you don't have to do all these diagrams. You'll need to choose the diagram that is best suited to your app. So an entity relationship diagram would be most appropriate if you were making a database. So if you're making a database app, then entity relationship diagrams are definitely the type of diagram that you want to create. However, if you're following the example project, which is making a language app, then clearly entity relationship diagrams aren't right. You probably want to be looking at something like a flow chart or a data flow diagram. So let's have a look then at what you've got to do, and then we'll have a look at an example of a student's work. So the first part is to break down what actually you have to do for P3, and this is broken down to 3 parts. You could probably want to refer back to this point in the video, pause the video, and then use this as a kind of template of the headings and the content headings, titles for your evidence. So you've been asked to provide a series of annotated diagrams that describe the proposed application design. In this example, we're going to assume that you are following the language app scenario. Part 1 is the scenario in which the application will be used with function requirements. Part 2 is process and data handling. Part 3 is the user interface designs. Let's have a look at these. So part 1, this covers the functionality of the actual app. So what does it do? We're talking here things like when you press a button, what happens? When you enter in text, what does it do? So it's the functions of the app. How do you know what the functions are? If you go back to the client brief or the client requirements, there should be a list in there of the types of functions and features of the application. Part 2 is process and data handling. Now, data doesn't have to be numbers, data could be text. So if somebody enters in a name or a word, that's considered data handling. And what happens when that word is entered? So if you're doing the language app and it asks you to enter the name for coffee, and you type in the word tea, what happens? The program should obviously respond that you've got an error. But if you did write in the word coffee, then the app should handle that data and should say that you've got it correct, potentially give you a mark, go on to the next question. So part 2 is looking at what data is going in and out of the system, and most importantly, how it's being processed, what's happening. Finally, part 3, this is probably the most simple part. This is looking at what the user interface looks like. So the colors, the fonts, the size of the button, whether they're rounded, whether there's images, how big this app is on the screen, and so on. So it's like the user interface, the GUI that the app presents. Now you will remember that you have to annotate the diagrams. So I would create a new Word document. Part 1, describe the scenario, create a flow diagram of the program, annotate what the user's doing, annotate what the program's doing. So this could be something like the player enters in their answer. So flow diagram showing what's happening, annotate it what the user's doing, annotate what the program's doing. I will show you examples of these shortly. Part 2 is a table. So again, something like this. What is the action that's happening? What data is being put in? What process is happening? So what's happening to that information? And what data is coming out? sometimes there won't be any data coming out. But if you say something like question appears on the screen, player enters the correct answer is compared with the stored answer, outputs well done, and increments the score by 1. And finally the GUI. So you want to include the sketches, the wireframe diagrams of the interface, include information, annotation about the color scheme, the font types, the size, the borders, and so on. So let's have a look how this fits in with an actual final piece of work. Right, so here's P3 and this is part 1. So part 1 is the scenarios in which the application will be used with the functional requirements. So here we go. Down here we've got the events that are going to happen. And then we've got the user. Sorry, we've got the data that goes in. In this case, it's the user selecting the correct answer button. Obviously, selecting a button is inputting data or a response. What does the program do? And does it pop up with the correct information? And so on. And the student covers each of the questions here. Okay. This is their GUI overview. Lacking some annotation at the moment, but you can see they've sketched out what it's going to look like. So question 2, 3, question 4. And the flowchart of the process is, this is actually, I think, part 1 they've got here. That's the scenarios in which the application will be functional. And they've given an overview of what happens. So look at a picture, pick the correct answer. You've got 3 options. You either select the correct answer button, the incorrect, or the incorrect answer button 2. Why is there 2 incorrect answers? Because you can see they've given you 3 options. 2 of them incorrect, 1 is correct. And then it flows through what happens depending on what you press. So you only have to do that for 1 question. You don't have to do that for every single question, unless of course the questions are different. And by different, I mean if you do different things. So for example, in this one it's just buttons. But if you had to answer it by typing something in, then you would do a different flow diagram. Now again, these are quite tricky to do now because you might not know what the program's going to do. So I would probably recommend that you create a rough sketch of this, create the actual application, the app, and then come back and design these. Here's another example for you. Don't forget annotation. Obviously the example one I showed you doesn't include the annotation. Secondly, always keep in your mind, could a third party, in other words somebody else, create this app based on my diagrams? Assume they know what they're doing, assume they understand how to create the apps with the software. Could they pick up from my P3, my proposed design solution, could they pick up and understand what to do and how to create this? And if they can, then that's pretty much a pass. So again, they've done it in the wrong order, but this is the processing table here, all the events that happen and the outcomes. Then we've got the GUI. Okay, again, annotation missing, but that should be in there. This is probably an older version. And then they've got the flowchart. So you put the right answer in or the wrong answer, what happens, and so on. So quite a simple one, but it was a pass. It covers the P3 criteria. Okay, many thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, any other areas you want me to cover, please pop it in the chat and we'll catch you on P4.